I'm Judith Pennington and would just like to welcome you to this webinar with Garth Fisher, who was a social worker, a biofeedback expert, a hypnotist, and he's used lots of different modalities, and then lately has gotten interested in neurotransmitters and has done some intense study into neurotransmitters and how they can help the brain function better. And he's going to tell us some stories about how neurotransmitters have helped him too. I know that this is going to be of tremendous interest to everyone and benefit as well. So here we go. I wonder if you can share a little bit about your early interest in biofeedback and what you were doing with that.
Well, so back in the 70s, I worked for a very progressive little community mental health center in a small county in Wisconsin with a very progressive director. And back when there was money to do things in mental health and community mental health, I got connected with the National Association of Biofeedback. I got connected with some people up at University of Wisconsin, bought some equipment and created my own protocol monitoring frontalis muscles, heart rate, hand temperature, and GSR at the time, although it's called some. So I made up my own charts and I do biofeedback with people and got pretty good with it myself. Then I started creating CD tapes for people to practice with. And kind of after about a year and a half of doing that, I got kind of discouraged because I couldn't seem to get people to practice in between sessions. Those who did actually noticeably got better. And so then I went off into doing hypnosis for a while, along with biofeedback. Use verbal, hypnotic, semi-hypnotic kind of suggestions along with biofeedback. I had personally had some really, what you might call way out there experiences when I got down into some deep space and I was really disconnected. I did not have an out-of-body experience. I went to the Monroe Institute twice to try to have an out-of-body experience. I didn't have an out-of-body experience at the Monroe Institute. But back in that kind of, and I look back on it now, when I got into those sort of unusual spaces, I realized now I got spooked by it and didn't try to get back into it for a long time. So then I got into went to the Monroe Institute and started doing their HemiSync and created my own HemiSync unit back in the late 70s. And the unit, I've still got it, but I've got the new modern one and it fits in my hand compared to fitting into a very large box, which is the phenomena of the decreasing size of everything electronic these days. It's been a really very interesting journey. I'm almost ready to retire.
Yeah, but then you're just going to keep peeling that onion. So first it was external devices and now it's neurotransmitters, and of course you're an intuitive reader as well. I mean, that's to be said. So
yeah, I slipped into being an intuitive consultant at a spiritualist camp for 3 summers, and after I got my massage therapy training, yeah, I'm a house painter too.
The thing I've been most interested in was the effect on brain waves. So acetylcholine basically is alpha or P300, sort of the speed at which the brain responds to things. Dopamine increases actually the voltage or the amplitude. So if you have someone with very low amplitude on their brain waves, then you want to give them increase their dopamine levels. Theta, or the GABA, increases theta. and it balances the symmetry and also the serotonin. Now, I hadn't seen the effect on delta before, but that might be reason I have to check on that one. But basically, it relates to the organization of the brain. So if you're looking at someone's brainwave pattern that's highly disorganized, you might want to look at the serotonin levels. And then we use that. We've been using it for years, and basically this works quite well. We'll give the Braverman quiz to clients, and then we'll attempt to get them to change their diet or their supplementation, which is not always in the cards. But if they do, then we periodically retest them and check the brainwaves, see how things are going. And it seems to be quite accurate in that sense. So I don't know. I haven't really followed what's happened to Braverman over the last decade. You were saying that he had some issues that he ran into.
He did some financial scammy stuff and got himself called in front of the medical boards, and I don't know if he lost his license for a while or not, but financially he was well, the article said some scam kinds of things, or exceedingly high expense for something.
Yeah, he used to charge something like $25,000 to do this. A study on people come in, take his quiz, they do an EEG scan on them, and then he would give them a dietary changes and supplements and monitor them over the subsequent year or whatever it was. But I think this was back several decades ago. He was charging $25,000 for that kind of service, which I thought was pretty outrageous.
Oh.
Hey, at one time they were charging $10,000 to become a Reiki master.
Yeah.
Back when I first met Reiki. So I can say that my memory, I started taking phosphatidylserine probably 2 years ago and noticed a gradual increase in my ability to recall things. And since I've started the supplements, plus the meditation, plus the mind mirror sorts of things, my memory for some things has improved significantly, where I can sit down and pick up exactly where I left off with somebody and remember the previous session, or even do a compiling of earlier sessions in a way that my brain didn't used to do something like that. And I'm attributing that to the supplements and to maybe the balance that I'm getting between the brain waves with all the things I've done in the last year and a half or so. I mean, Judith had me floating up off the couch when I was there at her place.
Well, you had a lot of gamma, so you had a tendency to float on up anyway.
Yeah. So
can I ask a couple of questions about this chart?
Yeah.
So acetylcholine, dopamine, GABA, and serotonin, these are neurotransmitters or neurotransmitter precursors? Because neurotransmitters are produced inside of the neuron, right?
Well, the serotonin's actually created. What I've read is that serotonin is created in the colon more than in the brain. That's what I've read. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, they're all neurotransmitters, and you're correct. The colon does produce the majority of the serotonin, but it's also produced in the brain. Actually, there are a variety of different forms of serotonin, and your psychedelics affect the serotonin systems, but they affect different forms of the serotonin. So it just kind of depends on which one you're stimulating.
So do you buy, okay, so here's some food, but otherwise, do you buy acetylcholine, dopamine, GABA, and serotonin off the shelf? Are they
No,
labeled as such, or?
no, you,
Down at the bottom here where it says supplements,
Uh-huh.
what I've read is that some of these act as carriers and some of them act as precursors to the different neurotransmitters to get them up into the brain or up into the cells.
So do any of them cancel each other out, or is this like the awakened mind pattern where you orchestrate these particular four to form an awakened mind pattern, or can they fight with each other, or are they harmonious with each other? Can you overdose on one? How do you know what to take, when, how much?
that's why I recommend taking the Braverman's quiz that's online, and it tells you genetically what your normal, let's say, production of neurotransmitters, these four neurotransmitters would be, and then it also shows you your current level of production and what's dropping off.
Huh.
And so you can begin to balance those things. Now, I'm very low in dopamine, and I, take tyrosine, and well, I'll also take DHEA and D complex and a number of other things that help bring the dopamine up. But I have characteristically very low amplitude on my EEG, and so I need to, take the dopamine to kind of bring things back up again. Also, you're right on the acetylcholine. I found my acetylcholine was dropping off, and I found that taking the supplements, huperzine and ginkgo and a number of other things, I have a slightly different list than what he has, sort of more updated. And taking those supplements really does help to sharpen your memory. Acetylcholine, of course, is a prerequisite, and just really required for keeping your memory sharp. And as it drops off, the measure is the P300 wave. As the P300 wave drops off, as you get older, your memory drops off with it until you have the number of seconds, like the P300 goes to P400. When it starts hitting P400, you're moving into Alzheimer's territory.
Interesting.
So basically, we just use this to help. It's like it doesn't create an awakened mind pattern. What it does is it balances the functioning of the brain so it's more optimal. So it's maybe easier to perform or develop an awakened mind pattern.
So before I started looking at the supplements, I came across the idea of serotonin toxicity, where docs have to be careful about getting too much serotonin into the brain, and because that can pose a problem. And then I can consistently have read where really high dopamine and low serotonin plays into addictions or compulsiveness significantly.
Well, I have heard that if you're doing like hard drugs, then serotonin levels just completely bottom out. I haven't heard anything said about dopamine, but what you're saying makes some sense, that the level of one might affect the other, but if you're out of serotonin, you might be out of all nervous system tolerance for any kind of stress. That's what they were saying in terms of addiction.
That's what Rudin says in his book. Inescapable stress drops serotonin, leaves dopamine running high, which sets you up for addiction. And he said that food and alcohol don't hit the system in a way to indicate that enough has been taken into the system. He said that for both food and alcohol. I don't remember he said that by others. But I've always said throughout my life that whatever mechanism tells me I'm full wasn't functioning. And I don't know if it's functioning any better at that part of it, but my ability to make decisions, that pause that I'm experiencing, it's definitely kind of works that way so that I don't overindulge. And that's a new phenomena for me.
Yeah, oddly enough, I was looking up a few bits on neurotransmitters right before this, and I came to some NIH site that said that tryptophan is a natural appetite suppressant. So if you're low in serotonin, then you're low in tryptophan, and therefore you don't know when not to eat. Now, that's an interesting thing considering that we've just had Thanksgiving in the US and everyone ate turkey and a lot of tryptophan. But I didn't see it suppressing any appetites in my house. I don't know about yours.
There's another book I've come across that you might be interested in. Is this one? Why isn't my brain working?
I've seen
Quite thick, but it covers all of this material in quite a bit of detail, and it's quite popular. It's written by a chiropractor with quite a bit of background, but I know a number of nutritionists and chiropractors who swear by this book, and it's I need to read it again. It's so detailed I've forgotten half of it already, but been a few years. But I would, so I remember it discusses the neurotransmitters in detail and the diets and all of the things are on this chart, but in much more detail than Braverman ever went into. So, and also the complications, so that you don't overdo some things and underdo others. One of the things I was going to say is I found that talking about addictions, that people who come to us use a lot of marijuana, which is medicinal around here. They generally have low GABA, and so marijuana tends to act as a GABA stimulant or a GABA complement, so that it kind of fills in the same receptors. And so if they have a lot of anxiety and issues that way, and plus serotonin being low, they may have anxiety with depression, that the GABA the marijuana really helps with that. And I'm not sure if CBD, I think the THC combination works better for that. And that's one way to kind of wean them off of smoking, 10 joints a day, is to get their GABA levels back up again.
Isn't that interesting that you bring that up? Because I read in some book on neurofeedback some years ago that that marijuana increases your alpha, and I've hooked some people up pre-stoned and then while stoned, and it certainly does.
Yeah.
And it also increases their theta, and then when they are not stoned, and supposedly it takes 3 days to get out of your system, and when they're not smoking marijuana, their theta drops down to really low levels, and they seem to really lose touch with themselves, and they smoke that pot and get their alpha increased in amplitude, and that's where they're at home. And so that really kind of makes some sense, the idea of pot as a stimulant of GABA and the theta connection as well. And then balance, calm, stability, even mood. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
All of those are characteristics of marijuana.
So we find also around here a number of people that we know, it seems to be quite popular here in California, are microdosing. And so they're microdosing both with mushrooms for the psilocybin, which is serotonin, and the LSD as well. Doses are so low you don't even notice that you've taken anything, but a number of people that we know who are chronically depressed are microdosing with mushrooms, and they say that it's helped them immensely because the mushrooms are a serotonin stimulant. So it's a different pathway than some of your SSRIs.
Yeah, and not to get off on a drug nation
Yeah.
conversation or anything, but I did just run into somebody at the Trans Tech conference who is well known for being a microdoser, and but he uses DMT, and he said it's something of 5-strand something or other DMT,
Yeah.
and he just had stunning brainwaves.
Yeah.
And
I've never
very,
seen anybody using microdosing on DMT.
yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah, I didn't even know you could.
I didn't either.
But as a microdoser, it's just given him a stunning gamma synchrony pattern,
Huh.
brainwaves, and an open-eyed, awakened mind pattern. And so it makes some sense, because these things certainly would affect brainwaves. But if they're affecting brainwaves, are they affecting neurotransmitters first? Or, it's a chicken or egg question, but either way, in terms of cosmic consciousness, it does seem to be a portal, these microdosing and these kinds of drugs. But I'm now thinking that it's simply because of maybe increasing neurotransmitter levels,
Oh, for sure.
that's the root of all of these things we're talking about.
Yeah. I'd have to look up DMT to see what neurotransmitters are affected by that, but it'd be interesting to see what they're doing.
Well, I think that DMT is related to psilocybin. So there would be the mushrooms that you're talking about, the microdosing on the mushrooms, which would be affecting the gamma and the theta. Can you scroll down? This is a fascinating chart. Lubricant.
Okay, I'm up at the top right now. This is, so he does characteristics when it's in balance, when the neurotransmitters are in balance. So
this,
my sleep right here has changed considerably. I've always been a rational thinker. That I would say my mood's fairly balanced. My blood pressure issues have stayed the same. I think my abstract thinking's improved some. My long-term memory's improved some. I do Tai Chi, and I did karate a long time ago. I have noticed a difference. Okay, this is an aside. Last year, I ended up with eyelid surgery, and my peripheral vision came back compared to when I was a lot younger. But my vision seems, with that, with the peripheral vision, when I do something that enhances my dopamine or do the tyrosine more, I can actually feel the information, peripheral and straight ahead visual, coming into my brain more than it used to. Or there's some, what was it, the lubricant, the speed, right above that where it says speed for the acetylcholine. There's a definite change in the speed of how I can feel data come into my mind. I should keep records of all this. I'm just making notes of this.
This is fascinating. I've taken that phosphatidylserine thing that I can never pronounce before, and I felt some positive benefits from that as well.
There's a group of us here connected to a bookstore called Earth Song Bookstore that's been around for 30 years, and I've been around it for 28 years. And there's a group of us that get together pretty regularly, and there's probably 15 of us that have been taking the phosphatidylserine, and at least 10 or 12 of us consistently say that we notice some mental functioning improvement that seems to be related to that. My idea is that it lubricates my brain cells, or lubricates my cells in some way that is an oil or something like that. But that I include that with all my recommendations to people taking supplements.
Yeah, the acetylcholine, as I mentioned, is related to the P300 wave, which I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. We don't measure it on our system, but on a, let's say, doing a QEEG, when you're given a stimulus, a sound, it's how quickly the brain responds to it. So within 300 milliseconds, you get a wave, a positive wave that goes up. It's called the P300 wave. That's related to your acetylcholine. As you get older, what they say is you take P300 and add your age to it. And if the acetylcholine is dropping off. Anyway, as you get older, that P300 goes to P340 or P350. And if it drops down to P400, like I say, that takes 400 milliseconds for it to emerge. You're moving into Alzheimer's territory. So that's why it's a good thing to always, as you get older, to take supplements that are going to increase that acetylcholine levels, and that will, speed up the brainwave recovery. On the balance on this, I can send you the link if you're interested to the quiz for the Braverman quiz. It's like about 300 questions long, so it takes 10 or 15 minutes to go through it, but it's self-scoring. But the first 4 parts of the quiz, it gives you the acetylcholine, dopamine, GABA, serotonin. All those numbers should be within 10 points of each other. And that's what they consider to be balanced. But when you go to the second 4 on the scoring, you should be at 0. And as your level of neurotransmitters drops off, then you'll go to, say, if you have a number of 5, that's within a normal range. But if you start getting into 10 or 15, particularly if you get up to a score of 15 on a particular neurotransmitter, this means you're getting extremely low, and you may have to go to medication rather than diet or supplements. So if you're like in the 10 range, you can probably correct it with diets or supplement. But if you get to 15 or 20, you're looking at probably you need to do, at least for a short period of time, some medication, according to Braverman's assessment of it whenever that was 20 years ago. So that's basically what we've been working on, plus using this other book, Why Isn't My Brain Working, for more details on that. So anyway.
Yeah, I've seen that book referenced as I've read through. Over in the dopamine acetylcholine, down in the supplements, it has phosphatidylserine in both of those.
Yeah, the phosphatidylcholine, what is it? There's a different choline supplement I'm taking. Can't think of what it is. I probably need some of it at the moment, actually.
I'd like to take that test. I think that'd be very cool. If you can send us the link to it, Oksana will put it up along with.
I'll have to look it up. I have to get out of this here. This big screen. It's actually John's or Garth's screen. Yeah, here's another. That's a good one.
I spent a few times going through the different books about the different foods that supplement or support the different things, and I found fermented foods over here in the inhibitory side of things for serotonin and GABA. So I have a fondness for kimchi. So it's like, okay, something speaks to me about that.
You're brave.
I've got some stories about that from my Korean karate instructor that introduced me to Korean kimchi that his wife made. First time I ever had a migraine was when I had that. Yeah, on another page, there's another thing about serotonin and dirt. People that get out and do garden work and get out into nature and stir up all the different substances that float around in nature. And I just came across the concept of nature bathing, which there's a Japanese word for that phenomena, that that it's really therapeutic, which I've always said with my backpacking. But there's similarities on almost all sides of this, and to go through and make my diet accordingly is more effort than I have been ever willing to do. But I've got a client that does it faithfully, and he has found it really, really helpful. His anxiety's decreased, his ruminating thoughts have decreased, and he's focusing more on the serotonin and GABA side for his food intake, and he's more or less vegetarian with fish. And he says this list has helped him. When I look at all these things, I find certain things that I've always been attracted to, and it's like, oh, I wonder if that plays into some intuitive thing somewhere down inside that says this food would be good for you. Anyway.
And yet you're saying that we need to have the proper balance between dopamine and serotonin, right?
Yeah. So when I came across this, the acetylcholine and dopamine as a stimulating, and then serotonin and GABA as an inhibiting. And then Rudin talks in terms of, the gasoline pedal and the brake. Mm-hmm. That the two stimulating, if you get too much of the stimulating, then you've got the gasoline going, and if you don't have enough of the inhibiting, then you don't have enough braking capacity to whatever you latch onto in that process, goal-seeking dopamine and that sort of thing.
So how would you balance this? If dopamine is, if everybody wants serotonin and acetylcholine for, I guess, neural, clear neural transmitting, I don't know what I'm saying here. I'm trying to say that it seemed like the acetylcholine is what made the neurons work better and faster and cleaner and smoother. So which would you do with these four?
I can tell you,
acetylcholine, if you need the serotonin.
I've been playing with dosages and playing with. I take the inhibiting one, serotonin and GABA at night. I take the dopamine, acetylcholine in the morning. I split them up that way, and then I have played around with dosages because I can tell the difference. Sometimes I can tell the difference, and it's really clear. Other times,
what do you eat at dinner? For dinner, because it's nighttime and you want to inhibit serotonin and GABA, what would you eat?
I don't even try and figure that out yet. That's another stage when I get more.
Talking about addictions, I have my coffee here.
Yeah.
What I discovered was that coffee is a dopamine precursor or stimulant. And so I'm chronically low, genetically low on dopamine, and I can go through a couple of pots of coffee a day very easily. But I'm very high on GABA. So if I don't have these stimulants here, I just get way too mellow.
You're right.
On the left hand of this page, the two most popular beverages, coffee and green tea, increase dopamine.
Yeah. And chocolate.
And chocolate, that's in there too. Over here, that shows up. Actually, dark chocolate shows up a couple of different places.
Times, yeah. It's good for you.
Well, I don't remember how this chart relates to the other one, but is the dopamine related to beta or alpha? Alpha, right? I thought I remembered
Dopamine
that.
is beta, a
It's
stimulant.
beta, okay. So that's why you can't get too mellow. You just go hang out in your alpha theta and not get anything done.
The other, I'll make another aside here. My son had a long time problem with alcohol. He's been sober for almost 4 years now. So he was drinking heavy and actually having some blackouts. He got treatment, he stayed sober, has been sober, but within 6 months of being sober, for the first time in his life, he started craving sweets. So I've started trying to have him experiment with supplements to see if he can sidetrack that craving part that, well, what sugar stimulates. And I don't remember right off the top of my head what sugar stimulates, but it stimulates one of these neurotransmitters. I think I was going to say dopamine, but I don't remember exactly.
You know, the folks who are coming off of addictions and have that very low serotonin, it seems like what would help them is just to eat whatever increases the serotonin, which would be an appetite suppressant. So you don't, because they're cross addictions. It really comes down to cross addictions. If you're trying to stop alcohol, everybody in an AA meeting is swilling coffee, trying to get some sense of trying to find some way to center themselves and to feel normal. So there's a lot of chaotic internal chaos when you stop some addiction, and it usually crosses over to another one, whether it's cigarettes or food.
Have you had an opportunity to have the mind mirror on someone who's withdrawing from a substance?
Yeah, terribly disorganized and scattered brainwaves, where their brainwaves are like pulsing from one side to the other. And which is just a reflection of what their brains are doing, right? The body's screaming, the brain starts to scream, and brain waves just bounce.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would play into the difficulty of the withdrawal process and the body adjusting chemically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really tough situation. And I really think that these neurotransmitters could be such a fantastic answer for them, whether you're taking in precursors like the phosphatidylserine thing.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to have to look at that and repeat the word several times before I can get that. But whether you're taking that as a precursor or whether you're eating the foods, I mean, it's very clear that serotonin is involved. The decimation of serotonin is involved with drug addiction. And it probably is involved with alcoholism as well, because another thing I got out of the same neurofeedback book that I found, that business about the marijuana increasing alpha, is that alcoholics don't have any alpha. And so they're drinking to be able to get their relaxation, to slow the beta, to pull the stress beta down to the alpha so that they can get some relaxation. And what is it? Why don't they have any alpha? Like what Gary said that he's doing is taking I'm confused about which is which, but whichever one he's taking, to get more alpha, well then that might be really good for your son. And the many people in my family who have troubles with alcohol. Luckily, that skipped over me. I saw it and I said, huh, that's not my destiny. I'm not going to have any part of that. But it has skipped me and gone into my children, and then it skipped the grandchildren. So these are, I don't know if it's epigenetic or whether it's neurotransmitters or both in combination. But of course, I meditate. See, meditation is known to increase your serotonin levels.
Yes.
And so I come out much more relaxed, not as prone to overeating. Everything that meditation does directly inside the brain, we're talking about, kind of external fixes for deficiencies, but meditation just balances everything automatically. So I think that's why I'm not so prone to, I do tend to overeat, but I think that's because I'm from Louisiana. I'm a great cook.
I've started reading about trauma and trauma backgrounds and how trauma can change the wiring in the brain, and I'm assuming also the balance or imbalance deficiency of neurotransmitters.
Yeah. And if you look at people with problems, substance abuse problems, and of course, Garth, I don't know how much you told them about your background as a social worker and that you have worked very closely with this population. Then not only are they down on serotonin and don't have any alpha to start with, but the trauma prevents them from wanting the alpha, which would get them in touch with the issues that are down accessed through the slower frequencies and theta and delta. So they've really got a tough situation.
Yeah, I've run into that when I've done different forms of relaxation training,
Mm-hmm.
and run into the resistance of that, or run into I've had a couple people drop down into what would be a hypnotic trance unwittingly, or down into alpha theta, because they didn't really know what to expect, so they kind of followed along with my instructions. The next 3 times they came into the office, we didn't get anywhere. They were completely distant, or wanted to distance themselves from going into that space, which would have been the alpha theta, I'm sure. But I've run into that kind of thing with my relaxation training with people.
Yeah, Robin Bernard on one webinar cautioned us about working with a traumatized population, because if you take them down into alpha theta, they can re-traumatize. Of course, the smart ones of us have got many, many different techniques, so that if because people can say at the beginning of a session, oh, I'm fine, I don't have any trauma, or I've never had any brain injury, and then I've never had any epilepsy, and then you get there and they go, oh, well, wait, I do have all those things.
Yeah.
So the smart ones of us have some tools, hypnosis, lots and lots of hypnosis tools. Of course, Gary is, the king of the EFT tapping, and all those things can help people if they're willing, but they have to be willing, and they have to want to open up. And there's a wonderful little book that I came across at the Open Center, where we went to do some monitoring for Dawson Church, Gary's Dawson Church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called The Untethered Soul. And
I've got 2 copies.
I honestly think that maybe for people who don't know how to move into their observer, their witness consciousness, it might be the most simply explained and comprehensive approach I've ever seen. It speaks to people in a very simple and basic and clear, and elegant and eloquent way. But the bottom line is it stays focused on this one theme all the way through. And is that if you want any spiritual growth, if you want any personal transformation, you have got to let the doer and the reactor, the mind and the emotions be there where you're observing it from a place of witness consciousness. And it really stays right on that. And if people are going to be willing to open up, then they need to understand where in consciousness and their awareness they need to be in order to be able to allow things to come up, whether it's via neurotransmitters or hypnosis or mind mirror training or whatever, because they're going to walk out of this training and what we're teaching them and then be completely caught up in this whirlwind of emotions and pain and I don't know what to do. And they really have got to read something like that or have, and I think this is probably why yoga has always said, have a guru, have a spiritual teacher, so you don't get lost. But really, that book is so complete in itself and so simply presented so that anyone, by the page 20, I'm going, all right, I get it. But then I was at the same time seeing, but there are people who don't get this. There are people who are completely wrapped in their emotions and their trauma. And they need to get that message over and over and over again. And that's really what that little book does. It's quite brilliant. I ordered it for a bunch of people. I'm mailing it out.
I've done the same thing. I've given it to other people. So I went through and collected, and there's, the literature shows all sorts of different supplements. So I just did supplements by category, and to the best I could tell from the literature and the dosage that they talk about, which from small to low for most of these, some of them don't have it. But down at the bottom, it's dirt's called the new Prozac. I found that interesting because I like spending lots of time out in the dirt. Up here where it says L-theanine, vitamin B1, when I take that, my dreams, I don't normally remember that I've even had a dream. When I take that, and I've been doing that for a couple of months now, I'm aware that I have dreamed, and I come close to remembering dreams. And that has been a consistent and a new phenomena for me with this particular, with the B1 vitamin for some reason. I don't know why, but it's been really interesting to observe.
Garth?
Anything on, yeah.
Is there any way we can get that chart from you?
Well, I'm sure there is. Judith can tell me how to send all these things out, or Oksana, I'm pretty sure, can tell me how to send all these out to people.
Yeah, it's just attach them to an email and send them to Oksana, and she'll turn it into a PDF and hang it up as a download on the webinar website. And so,
well, thank you, Garth. I was also wanted to ask Gary, was this chart something in the Braverman book? Is that what I understood?
This one isn't. This is my own compilation.
This is your own. That's what I thought. Yeah.
It's my own compilation of all the different things I read out there as possibilities. I tend to try and create a very big picture in my own mind about the possibilities and kind of narrow it down to what I'm going to experiment or play with or do something with.
Do you actually, Garth, do you actually create some kind of methodology for your any kind of personal study?
This kind of.
Have you done experiments on yourself or with other clients regarding these?
Yeah, I have with the supplements, and and I have with I'm someone that grabs onto almost any kind of approach for a while to see what it does for myself and what it can do for clients.
I put on the chat the link to the Braverman quiz.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take that, you can actually see what your balance of these 4 neurotransmitters would be. And in order to interpret that, there are other, I think Garth has information on how to interpret that. And also like I say, for the first set of numbers that you get, the top 4 numbers, when you get this quiz back, they should be within 10 points of each other to be balanced. If you've got one that's like 10 and another one that's like 50, then you're out of balance someplace. And then the second group of 4 numbers, ideally they should all be 0, but they should be at least 5 or less. If they're more than 5, it shows that particular neurotransmitter is beginning to drop off or out of balance currently. And you might want to go to supplements or dietary changes and so on to bring that back. Also, the acetylcholine thing that I found, I forgot the name of it. It's called neurocholine. It's a form of choline. It's acetylcholine, and it has a very long chemical name here. But it's actually a supplement, and you can get it. So it's neurocholine. And that I found very effective in bringing up acetylcholine levels. So anyway, was there, this, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, this is the instructions. This is the one I use with clients, and it does it by true false. It does it by each one.
Yeah, this is the one that's online, and you can just click on all the true false all the way through, and it will automatically score it at the end. It's doing the paper and pencil quiz is kind of lengthy and takes computational skills that are beyond my capabilities. Figure things out. So I find the online quiz, which is exactly identical to this.
Okay.
All of the information.
We'll probably all take it and see what we've got here.
Yeah, and if we could put this up on the website too, for the sake of people who are not in a computer accessible situation. I can think of somebody right now that could do this true or false test on paper.
I'll add it to my attachments over to Oksana.
Excellent. So Garth, this is your computer that we're looking at. You've been scrolling through?
Yes.
Because you have got directories and files. I mean, this is...
I got enough to keep me for the next 10 years.
How long have you been researching this? Because this looks like
the neurotransmitters for the last almost a year now. Prior to that, I wasn't paying any attention other than taking the phosphatidylserine and my vitamins, and I've played around with different supplements over the years.
Well, you do a lot of hiking too.
Serious about it.
That's interesting about the serotonin in dirt. Makes you think about animals that eat dirt and children who eat dirt. But for you, you've been pounding the Appalachian Trail and other mountains, and you're walking, and that always does me a lot of good to get out in nature. I mean, I drop into my alpha instantaneously, and suddenly, what a relief it is.
Well, after the first 3 days when you're doing a hike and your body starts to get used to it, then you kind of start coasting along in a nice reverie state and swat a few mosquitoes. So I did a 10-day silent meditation out of the Buddhist tradition last year. I'm going to do a 3-day in a couple of weeks. And I mentioned to you Judith, that I offered to use the mind mirror on the instructors at that particular, who have done 30 years, 20 years, 15 years of this particular type of meditation, and none of them were interested in knowing what their brain waves were like when they were meditating.
You'll find this to be quite common among long-term meditators. They're not really.
I was surprised because I thought, oh, I'd really want to know. That'd be really interesting for me, but they were not interested at all.
Garth, I was going to suggest that if you are interested in finding out why people are, doing things in some of your, it's called, I don't know if you can read that or not, but it's Alpha Theta Neurofeedback for the 21st Century, 2nd edition. And I highly recommend it for anybody that's going to be doing any type of awakened mind training with groups of people or even on one-to-one. It's a little bit pricey, but I find it to be really worth it. And they do give tribute to Max Cade in there for having been one of the early developers of Alpha Theta feedback. So Green and Green, Max Cade, and Peniston were all part of this sort of Alpha Theta clinical work, whereas it's like a different branch from the clinical EEG where they do the brain mapping these days. So this particular form of neurofeedback for the Alpha Theta training is more oriented towards the clinician, the therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are looking to be able to access traumatic memories and so on, it goes into a lot of detail. It's many different.
So it's Alpha Theta feedback. What's the rest of the title?
Alpha Theta Neurofeedback.
Alpha Theta Neuro. Okay.
In the 21st century.
Okay.
And that's the 2nd edition just came out. It's expanded with about 4 more chapters and updated information on some of the others.
Okay.
And I going through their references, I came up with another paper here, which is somewhere in this pile of stuff, that someone is actually, they're beginning to wake up to the fact, the neurofeedback people are beginning to wake up to the fact that it is the ratios, the interrelationships of the different frequencies, and not a particular band. Okay, we got gamma and it does this, or we got alpha and it does that. They're particularly in the Alpha Theta book here, they realize that it's the particular ratios of beta to alpha to theta to delta that produces the different effects that we experience. And so you really need to start looking at the overall pattern, which Max Cade said, originally, 50 years ago. Hey, it's the overall ratio and patterns of the brain waves, and it's not alpha. It's not the end all and be all of everything.
Yeah, back when this first got started, alpha was the big goal to achieve.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Now it's gamma. I think gamma is the new alpha.
Gamma's the new alpha. I like that.
I think it is too. But also, we recognize that whilst we might do gamma training, that gamma has to be integrated with theta, and alpha and delta. Otherwise, people are blowing out light bulbs and having difficulties managing their responses to electricity.
Hannah used to have that problem.
Yeah, she did.
You walk down the street and blow out all the light bulbs on the streets.
Lots of people, surprising number of people do. Luckily, I'm not one because I need my computer to keep working.
Yeah, we have one client that comes in here to see Donna twice a week, and he can't get near a computer. He just fries them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
go away. Don't come. His wife won't let him near any of the computers in the house.
We have a member of our group that does that frequently also.
Well, what I've found in working with, I mean, we're going off track a little bit now, but in working with psychics and healers who have that problem, what I found is that you just teach them to ground in theta, literally, and ground in delta, and then the effect, at the very least, is not so painful for them because, you know, they're feeling nervous and chatty, and then they don't blow things out as much. They're just ungrounded. They're in this untrained, high amplitude, high frequency gamma that's separated from the rest of the pattern. The rest of the pattern is just, mind mirror pattern is just fractured. It's diffracted, organized, disorganized. But once they bring that gamma into the beta and integrate it with the beta, and then thus the rest of the pattern, most of those effects just disappear. I was just in meditation and I could feel that gamma rising and giving me a splitting headache. Just had to pull it off, distribute that energy from the head and the crown and the third eye, distribute it all the way to the tips of the fingers. So this grounding really can help people like that. But on the other end, you know, I think maybe, Garth, what you're saying here is that we can do hypnosis, we can do awakened mind, or any other sort of way that one addresses trauma. But if there is an underlying nutritional / neurotransmitter deficiency, then it's a tougher climb up the mountain for people, that this is really foundational thing to consider, and get the body. It's just one system, but if nevertheless the body has got cravings and malfunctioning, then it's really hard for the emotions and the mind and the spirit to soar, to calm and thus soar. Have you got something else you want to show us, and what looks like a library of information?
Well, no, one of the things over the last 5 to 8 years of working in mental health, and I came across the idea somewhere, and then as I watched it happen, that psychiatry, as it's practiced now with its medication focus, doesn't really, well, it may have been Dr. Amen in one of his lectures that I've heard him say that psychiatry is a medical specialty that really doesn't study the body and the brain that much, or work on creating a platform of physical health to then do the mental health on top of that.
Yeah.
So when I've been working on this over the last year, it's like you just said, if the brain chemistry, neurotransmitter really should be kind of the base that you build on to start getting up into the other levels of changing thinking and shifting emotions and retrieving memories and integrating and all that kind of stuff. That you got to have a reasonably physically healthy base, body-wise, brain-wise, for that to really work well to help a person change.
Well, and this is a parallel to Maslow's hierarchy, isn't it? If your basic survival and physical needs aren't met, good luck building on love and transpersonal consciousness. You have to take care of yourself first.
So I'm sure somewhere in the United States there's at least 1 or 2 or 10 programs that start at the base and say, let's take care of the physical stuff and make sure that's working okay first. Then we'll start working on the mental health sort of things next. Then we'll do all these techniques that are out there to help work with the mental health side of things.
Well, we certainly welcome anything that you want to send from your library, and we'll study with it and experiment with it. I think it's incredibly important. I'm going to get some of that phosphorylserine stuff right away.
Phosphatidylserine.
Phosphatidyl.
Another, you just reminded me of something in talking about diet. Years ago, I read a book by a neurofeedback therapist, Primal Mind, Primal Body. And she, I don't know if you've seen that one or not, but her story was that she had major depression and had gone through every medication and therapy in the book and wound up going to neurotherapy or neurofeedback training and recovered. And she was so impressed with neurofeedback that she became a therapist herself. And then as she was treating people, she would find people who would just kind of stall out in the treatment, wouldn't make any further progress. The brainwaves would be disorganized, and she wasn't doing awakened mind, just clinical neurofeedback. But she couldn't figure out why, why some people made good progress and others didn't. So she began keeping records of more complete workups and began to look at their diets. And what she found was that the people who stalled out, who had the greatest difficulty in shaping their own brain waves and doing the neurofeedback, were vegetarians, and vegans were the worst. Now, whether or not it was the diet that was causing that, or was the people with just totally disorganized brains wound up going to a vegan diet, she didn't know for sure. But she found when she took them off the vegetarian vegan diets and put them on a more sort of basic meat and vegetable sort of diet, that their brainwaves improved and they started making progress again. So there's something deficient in their diets as a vegan or a vegetarian that was slowing them down in their progress, their development.
That makes perfect sense.
So I hope I didn't offend anyone out there listening to this.
No,
who happen to be vegans.
I think it's really important. A lot of people who are vegans and vegetarians get really sick and almost die, and they get back on the meat diet. And I'm not suggesting that for everybody, but I personally know someone that happened to, and she just was fading away, and she went back on meat and snapped back in a second. Who knows why? Or I find that my body sometimes it wants one diet, sometimes it wants another diet, and somebody had a word for that. Oh, a funny word. I'll remember it in a minute. Probably need a neurotransmitter to remember it. Something Tarianism, not an omnivore, something similar. But it's funny you mentioned that book, which we would all do well to read, that by Nina, I think it Gorganides or something like that. Yeah. I just met her at Trans Tech, and she was a tremendous admirer of Anna Wise and had met Anna and done some sessions with her, and was quite emotionally affected by just talking about Anna's passing and everything. And she's still on the lecture circuit, full blast with that same book. That really made an impact that continues to matter to people. So I think when Oksana's making our little list of great books to explore and investigate, we'll stick that on.
Yeah, that was Nora, and I can't pronounce her last name. Gedegades, something.
Yeah, that's her.
I think it's Greek.
No.
But that's an old copy. I don't know if it's a newer edition.
Primal Mind. Yeah, she's just a lovely, lovely person.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed her.
Actually, a picture of her up on the website, coming up with this Eureka Times and the Inside Trans Tech story. She's sitting on the front row in the Sophia University meeting where I monitored some people just the day after. She's right there. So I wonder, we probably should move toward wrapping this up a little bit, unless we have other questions. John, you may have things that you want to ask Garth or Gary, and maybe Oksana does too.
Resources would be a good start for me, since I'm so new to the whole thing. I really wouldn't know where to start. I just would be interested in methodologies, if people have any, their particular formats they like to use to study themselves or patients or friends, whatever. And anything like that to get a guide for what's actually being done. That would be. I'm just a beginner, so I'm trying to sort it out on that level. I think having a nutritional neurotransmitter a baseline is a good idea to start in any kind of process, in my mind.
Wonderful. Gary, did you have any comments that you wanted to make or questions to ask?
No, Garth has pretty well covered it, and he's got a lot of great charts there. That would be nice to share with everybody. Even to put in your Times magazine, some of them, or some of the links, for online someplace. Yeah, that's pretty much.
I appreciate your input there, Gary. You've got time in grade, as they say in the military.
And we appreciate you, Garth, for all this hard work that you've done and your willingness to share it with us. I think that anybody that watches this webinar or downloads any of these is going to find tremendous value, not only for themselves, but because we all know people who are suffering from addictions, and just that one little piece on the serotonin can change somebody's life and the lives of the people who are suffering with them, because these addictions do travel through families, and there is field coupling, and it's not just even changing one person at a time. It could be a whole big group of people. So thank you ever so much. We hope that as you learn more, you'll share it with us, and we'll see you on future webinars, and just pop right in with new findings and stuff.
We'll keep working at it.
Yeah. So thank you all very much for being here, and thank you so much for your patience with the technical difficulties. I think Oksana's still there. We'll have at least a partial recording, and I think we got really the wonderful stuff recorded and share it with other people as well. Food for the brain, and apparently food for the soul as well.
Thank you, Garth.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you're welcome. Thank you all.
See you another time.
Okay.